Welcome to the Vets Talking Pets podcast. From scales to tails, real talk with real vets. No pet subject is off limits. With your hosts, Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie.
Welcome to this edition of the Vets Talking Pets podcast with Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie. Recently we talked about the history of domestication of dogs and how dog breeds developed. So today we're going to turn it to cats. And it's a slightly different story, isn't it, Maggie?
Yeah, it is. Obviously, we tend to think of the Egyptians as being the first people to domesticate cats. And this is partially true. There's a lot of genetic evidence that shows that today's domestic cat evolved from the Egyptian and Near East populations of the African wildcat. And the African wildcat is still found today and lives in arid, barren environments where prey is very sparse. So they evolved to be very territorial, solitary hunters in order to get enough food, and they only came in contact with their own kind for mating. And they looked like our domestic cat, a sort of slim, pointy tabby, really. And our cats have retained a lot of their characteristics, their hunting behaviour, marking territories, etc.
So the cat family arose really around 12 to 13 million years ago, it's believed, isn't it? And they developed into 8 groups, isn't it? One of which of the groups is the wildcats.
Yes.
And there are lots of different wildcat species.
Yeah, there are, aren't there? And, obviously in the UK, our only wild cat is the Scottish wildcat. And there has been studies that have shown that our domestic cats don't come from the Scottish wildcat. It's actually a bit more naturally aggressive than the African wildcat. But we don't have lynx anymore, do we?
No,
we
we
used to
don't.
have, which is a bit sad, and obviously some talk of reintroduction, but I'm not sure how that would go down with some sheep farmers and things like that.
It'd be amazing, wouldn't it, though, to see lynx in the wild?
Yeah. It would be really amazing.
So we actually thought the date for domestication, there's been some kind of changes, isn't there, recently, in terms of when we first thought the domestic cat first existed. Previously it was thought to be about 5,000 years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, and certainly much, much more recent than dogs. But it has proved to be actually more like 10,000 years ago. And the first archaeological evidence of people living with cats was earlier than even some of the Egyptian ones. It was from a grave in Cyprus where a man was buried with his cat, so we obviously cared about that cat very much.
We did, and it's interesting, isn't it, because cats kind of domesticated themselves.
Yeah.
Similarly, if we think back to our conversations we had before around the dogs, because that was a similar, I suppose, story, that those that were more confident started to come closer to people and kind of integrate themselves with them. But it's thought, isn't it, that the people in Egypt and the Near East started farming and producing grain, and as a consequence, as we see today, that lots of small rodents were attracted to those grain stores as a good food source, and hence that attracted then more of these confident African wildcats to come and start hunting and eating, killing those mice and rodents. So yeah, that's what we think happened.
Yeah, and obviously as humans, we watched this hunting behaviour and we thought it was really advantageous. So we encouraged the cats to stay, and then obviously that relationship and bond gradually started to appear. And obviously the Egyptians really valued cats. And they, in the end, they worshipped them as gods, which obviously cats have never forgotten. And they had really strict laws protecting cats, and some were mummified after their deaths as a sort of mark of respect, and I suppose so the owners could go into the next life with their beloved pets. And owners, I think, really did shave off their eyebrows as a sign of mourning when their cat died. So yeah, they really did mean a lot to the Egyptians. And in the end, one of their goddesses, Bastet, took the shape of a cat, or a woman with the head of a cat, and she was the goddess of obviously cats, but also secrets and fertility and childbirth. So the Egyptians really did love cats.
They really did, didn't they?
Mm.
And I suppose, how then did cats start to move across Europe? I'm always a bit confused anyway, how the different lines, I suppose, have moved across and developed it for the cats, or evolved for the cats that we now have as domesticated cats. But it was the Romans, wasn't it, that really started to spread those domestic cats across Europe?
Yes, I think they must have, because obviously they did invade Egypt, didn't they? So they probably saw them then, and they probably saw the benefits of them and started to take them across Europe. And then really beyond that, a lot of it probably was the fact that loads of ships tended to have ship's cats, because obviously having a food store on your ship, they had a lot of rats. So they would keep cats on board to control them. But obviously then they were landing somewhere else, perhaps Northern Europe, or even going over to America. And the cats were dispersed like that. But not everyone liked cats so much, did they?
No, and there certainly have been periods in history, haven't there, where the cats really just haven't fared as well as they should have. And I think the Middle Ages is a good example, isn't it, where cats were associated with witchcraft and superstition.
Yes, and I always think I wouldn't have fared very well at that time. I'm a single woman and I have a black cat. I'm left-handed and I know about medicine, so I'd have ended up on the ducking stool. But obviously, cats' ability to control rodents was still really, really valued by a lot of people. So many communities still really valued them, despite some of the superstitions that
some of those superstitions, I suppose, have really carried on even today, haven't they? So they've not gone away. So some people can be quite worried, I suppose, about the presence of cats.
Yes, and I always find it sort of odd with black cats. Some people think of them as lucky and some people think of them as unlucky, and I think it depends a little bit on cultures, but certainly in some cultures, if a black cat crosses your path, it's meant to be not very good. But and it did affect, I think, the home ability of black cats.
Didn't it?
Working in a cat charity, the blacks and the black and white cats were the ones that were slowest to find a home, and that always seemed a bit sad. But things have, not necessarily completely changed, but I think most people are a little bit more accepting of black cats. They just sometimes are seen as being a bit more plain and not quite as desirable as tabbies or gingers or whatever.
Yeah. So I suppose up to this point that we've got to in history, cats haven't really been selectively bred, have they, by us humans? So they're very good at hunting, and they didn't need any kind of modification for that, because actually they could naturally do that, so they fulfilled the role that we needed them to.
It's sort of unlike dogs, where actually people wanted to emphasise certain actions like the hunting or the retrieving. So yes, they were just already good at hunting, and they had other characteristics that made them really good pets. Like they're generally really clean, because obviously they groom themselves, they buried their feces. They're highly intelligent and they're quite playful animals. So people liked them as pets.
Yeah, so moggies are domestic short hairs, domestic long hairs, etc. Your everyday kind of moggie cat were the original pet cats, weren't they?
They were. They're not a crossbreed. Sometimes people think of them as being the mongrel or whatever, but they were the original pet cat. And actually, because there was that lack of selection at those early stages, cats' behaviour hasn't actually really changed that much over the years. They're still really programmed to hunt. They don't just hunt out of spite. But we'll be talking more about cat behaviour in future podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. But there are different types of forerunners, really, aren't there, for the breeds that started to appear initially through kind of natural selection, so not actually that we've actively selected for them, but examples such as the Norwegian forest cat evolved with a longer coat because they were living in a cold climate, so they needed it to keep warm. And it's thought that the Vikings took this type of cat to North America, and actually they are the ancestors of the Maine Coons.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a sort of myth in America, that and why they're called Maine Coons is that it was a cat crossed with a raccoon, which obviously is not true. But genetically, the Norwegian forest cat is very, very similar to the Maine Coon. So, and they're that what you call a semi-long-haired cat. But obviously, it had a warmer coat. And then, in contrast to that, the cats that lived in Southeast Asia and other sort of warm, quite moist climates, I suppose, were slimmer and sleeker and had much sort of shorter coats. And these are the ancestors of what we would call Oriental cats, things like Siamese, etc. now. And really, proper selective breeding to try and create different breeds only started about 200 years ago. Of course, with the Victorians, who loved to do things like showing animals or whatever.
I know we really do have to, I suppose, can we say blame the Victorians for all the breeds
yes.
that we have now, because they were the forerunners in that. So
yes, but there's still far fewer breeds of cats than there are of other domestic species. I think different registering bodies count different things as official breeds, but it's around only 40 to 50. I think with dogs, isn't it, 200 or 300 different breeds? It's hugely different, and it's interesting. I was reading something recently, and it was talking about the fact that all members of the cat family, and we're meaning everything from tigers down to the smaller wild cats, all pretty much have the same sort of blueprint, their physical shape. I know there's differences in size, but their general sort of behaviour and shape is very, very similar, because actually it's been a really successful model, and there's much more variation if you look at all the different wild dogs, and some differences in behaviour as well. So yeah, how do you improve perfection?
Yeah, exactly.
Cats are perfect.
Say that again, Maggie.
Perfect.
So most cat breeds were developed in the mid-19th century, weren't they?
Yeah,
they were
were
selectively bred really for colour, shape and temperament rather than actual function, as we've talked about, because they're perfect.
Yeah.
So it was actually more around what particular colour people would prefer, and actually, a little bit around temperament, and actually, do we want shorter legs, longer tails, broader, wider, etc. But most cats in Egyptian or Roman art, when you look, are actually tabbies, aren't they? So they're like their wild cat ancestors that needed camouflage. And it's, if you look at a black cat, they do still have the tabby mark, don't they?
They do. They do. It's actually in there, and obviously ginger cats still have the sort of tabby markings. It's just a slightly different colour. And I said, what the theory is really about getting all those different colours starting to appear was, once cats were more protected because they were living with humans, they actually were more protected from predators, and so actually they didn't so essentially need the tabby markings as camouflage. And actually in some populations of feral cats where they're perhaps on an island or something, and there's a bit more need for camouflage, even if they start off with lots of different colours, often over time it's the tabbies that actually survive. So it's quite interesting. And other colours appear as natural mutations. And obviously then the Victorians decided to selectively breed from some of them. And it was the same really with shape, that some of the differences occurred as natural mutations, and then the Victorians decided that they would selectively breed them.
Yeah, and the Victorians, as you said before, they were the ones to have the first official cat shows.
Yes, they were.
So and that tended to increase the popularity of the pedigree or the purebred cat.
Yes, and they sort of defined what each breed should be. And obviously some of the things that they selected, they were doing it for appearance or for something that was different, and they weren't always aware that actually there might be negative features. Things like a dwarfism gene leading to breeding cats with shorter legs, or other things where they had no tail, where actually there are some negatives. But I think we're going to cover all that in, I think, the next podcast.
Yeah. So there are several groups of pedigree cats that differ, aren't there? That both appearance and temperament.
Yes.
And it's certainly, we found, unfortunately, that some have increased the risk of certain diseases as well. So we talked about dwarfism and problems associated with that a little bit. But actually, polycystic kidney disease or diabetes is a problem that we've seen associated with some of these purebred cats. And it's important to know when you're getting or you're choosing a particular breed that you want to take home, what diseases that you may have that particular breed is at risk at. So it's really important, isn't it, to do your research and actually find out what you should be concerned about, and actually what's the long-term effect as well.
Yes, and with some of the problems, and polycystic kidney disease is one of these, where if animals are identified and not used for breeding, actually you can overall decrease the amount in the total population, or certainly within that breed, and that is something that has been done, I think, particularly with the Persian cat, which is great. So you really want to do your research and then find out, are there things that could be done to make sure that you're getting an individual who doesn't carry certain genes.
Yeah, so where would you suggest, Maggie, that we go to find that type of information out?
Well, I think the best place probably is going to the website of the GCCF, which is the General Council of the Cat Fancy. There are also other organisations like International Cat Care. They've got a lot about different cat breeds and particularly about genetic diseases, and there's quite a lot of information on Cats Protection's website as well.
Yeah, I was hoping that you were going to say the GCCF, what
yes.
the acronym stood for. So
yes.
I have to say that one.
Yes. And the GCCF, which are a registering body, and they run some of the big cat shows still today, and they classify pedigree cats into 6 different groups. So we thought we'd just run through it just roughly to give you an idea of the range of sort of breeds that are available, should that be something that you're interested in. And the first one is the Oriental and Siamese group. I'm sure most people know what a Siamese cat is like. But it's Siamese, and also other cats that are called Orientals, like the Oriental White or the Oriental Black, and Balinese, which is sort of like a Siamese, but it's a sort of semi-long-haired. And they tend to be tall, very slender cats with big ears, and they're really vocal, aren't they?
They are very vocal. I was just thinking about how long their legs are.
Yes.
Well. They're
very elegant,
aren't they? Yeah.
The noise, personally, I find a little bit annoying.
And they are very noisy.
They're
very
really
attention seeking.
Very attention seeking. And if you had one in the surgery, you usually knew that you had one in. And particularly if the females came into season, it often prompted people to get them neutered because they were so noisy. But they get quite bound to their owners, don't they? They form very, very strong bonds, and also strong bonds with siblings. If you have two, often when one dies, the other one is quite distraught.
Yes, we've got the Persians and the exotics, haven't we? That's another group. So they include the Persian cats or the exotic short hairs. So they're cats that are a bit stockier, aren't they? They've got flat faces. They're quite solid with rounded bodies, and they've got these long or these dense coats. Their coats are quite thick if they're the shorter haired ones.
They are, and the long haired ones like the Persians, it's like a really fine hair. It's almost like, is it the undercoat, I think, that's been exaggerated? But anyway, it doesn't really react quite the same as normal hair, so actually it mats more easily.
It does mat very easily.
And that's certainly something you have to think about how much grooming you have to do, and sadly in vet practice we quite often ended up anaesthetising them every few months to shave them because they were so matted, and obviously that's not a great thing to
some of them you have to shave them and do the line cut, don't you? So they've got the furry feet and furry head, and
then a clipped body. And the next group are the semi-long hairs. These are things like the Maine Coon and the Norwegian forest cat that we talked about earlier, but also cats like the Ragdoll, the Burman and the Turkish Van all come into this group. Turkish Vans are particularly noted because they are cats that like swimming. The name Van comes from Lake Van in Turkey. But these cats, they have got, well, you know, as the name suggests, a longish coat, but it's not as sort of full and long as a Persian, and it's quite silky. It doesn't mat quite as much. And medium to long, and they're quite a diverse group, but they don't have such flat faces, and you know, can be quite big in the case of Maine Coons.
They can be really quite tall, can't they?
And Norwegian forest cats, but Maine Coon are the biggest breed, and they can be, the males can be 8 or 9 kilos, and they're sort of big rather than fat, so to speak.
Yeah, and actually a friend recently showed me a photo of their daughter holding their 2-year-old Maine Coon. And I know sometimes you see these AI generated photos, or you see that they've pushed the cat to the front, so the cat looks massive compared to the person stood behind. But their Maine Coon is genuinely massive, because she's a teenager holding this cat, and the cat probably, if you stood him upright, would almost be as tall as her. So they are big in, not fat, but they're big boned, aren't they? They're
they are big, and actually generally I think really nice temperament, but they can sometimes get some joint problems, can't they? Some hip problems.
They can. So then we've got the British Shorthairs are another group, aren't they? So we've got, within that group, we've got the British Shorthairs, the Manx, the Selkirk Rexes. So they tend to be described as cobby, I believe, and rounded body and head. So they're much more rounded a face, aren't they?
Yes.
With that deep, really plush coat.
Yes, and the British Blue is the sort of archetypal, and it is used, I think, in adverts quite a lot, isn't it? Definitely sort of for pet food. So they do have that sort of quite, I suppose, appealing rounded face, don't they? They're a little bit flat-faced. They're not as sort of squish-faced as Persians are, and they do have a lovely, lovely deep coat. And then the next group is the foreign group, and I'm sure this must have sort of come off the Oriental, really, but things like the Russian Blue, the Abyssinian, which is sort of, again, close-coated, but a little bit of a sort of what they call a tick, isn't it? The coat of the Abyssinian. Slightly, I don't know how you describe it when you're just talking about it, but it's, each hair has got different colours, I think.
Yeah, it's like yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Almost like a striated colour.
Yes, and then the Devon and Cornish Rex are in there, and Rex cats are generally ones where they have almost like a slightly wavy coat.
It's kind of quite coarse, isn't it? And it's not the softer coat.
Yeah. And officially Bengals and Sphinx cats are also, included in that group. They tend all to be short-haired, or even, obviously in the case of the Sphinx, no hair. We'll talk about that in the next episode, about whether that's a good or bad thing. And again, they're quite sort of slender, aren't they? And perhaps not as exaggerated as the Siamese.
Just not quite as extreme, aren't they? So they're maybe a little bit more subtle, a bit more your standard cat shape, I suppose, that you would imagine. And the other group is the Burmese. So within that group, we've got Burmese, Tonkinese, and Australian mists. Do you know, I've actually not heard of an Australian mist.
Do you know what? I had to look it up, because I was looking at the GCCF website to make sure I got the groups right, and I had to look it up, but it's quite like a Burmese cat, really.
So I often get Burmans and Burmeses muddled as well in my head. I find it quite difficult to get those right, but the Burmese and the Tonkinese, they tend to be much more moderate, muscular cats, aren't they, with a rounded, compact look, and they're really affectionate little cats as well. Yes,
I really like Burmese cats, and I think I would never have a pedigree cat, because on principle I would always have a moggie, but if I had to have a pedigree cat, I would have a Burmese, because I just think they've got great characters. Sometimes they can be quite dog-like, actually, and they can, retrieve tools. But they're still proper cats. So I really like them, and Tonkinese are they're quite similar, really, aren't they, to the Burmese, and as I said, Australian mists. Neither of us had heard of them, but you can always Google if you want to have a little look at those.
So we've got some others, haven't we, though, as well, that they're not registered, so they're the 6 groups we talked about. But the Scottish Fold, the Savannahs, they tend to be the pedigree cats that are developed from wild crosses or genetic mutations, which have happened recently, and they're kind of all within that group. And actually, the GCCF will not register them; they don't recognise them as a group. For mainly welfare purposes, really, isn't it?
Yeah, because some of them, the genetic mutation comes with a problem, like the Scottish Fold cat that gets lots of arthritis. And again, we'll talk about it next time, but they are banned from being registered for a reason. Some other registration bodies will actually register them, but I do think it's a real concern if they do. And sadly, I think a lot of these breeds are now being bred to be in a more extreme form. Obviously, Siamese were sort of slim, but when you look at a picture of the first one that was given by the King of Siam to probably Queen Victoria or someone like that, they were not that pointy, but now there's some that are just really, really sort of massive ears and really skinny, and I'm not sure I think they're that attractive, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it's when we talked about the dog breeds as well, isn't it? It's a similar pattern. It's useful sometimes to go back and look online to actually see what the breed originally looked like, and then look to see what the breed now looks like, and actually see what an impact we as humans have had in this selective breeding process to create these extreme characteristics. And it gives you a bit more opportunity then question, I suppose, why of is this right that we've come from here to here and we've had this control and changed this cat breed
because
so much?
Absolutely, because cats did evolve to sort of fit their ecological niche, and as we've said, they've been a very successful group of animals. But with things like some Persian cats being bred for longer and longer coats, very fine. The cats physically can't groom themselves very well because they've got a really flat face. And so we can start to get these problems.
And we've got newer breeds. We talked about the ones that the GCCF will register as well, but we've got newer breeds, haven't we, being developed now, where they may have folded ears, they may be more extreme with no hair, etc., like your sphinxes. So actually, we're still doing it, and we're probably doing it more now than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, like the bully cat, which is meant to be like the equivalent of an XL bully, where they've got bowed legs, they're bald, they've got loads of wrinkles. It's not good for welfare, because really whatever breed you have, they've all got those basic fundamental cat characteristics. So they all want to hunt, they all have sort of limited sociability with other cats, they all need to groom, whether they've got hair or not. And we have to be careful we're not forgetting that all those cats are fundamentally cats.
So I think it obviously talked about breeds. We haven't really touched that much on the normal moggie cat at the beginning of the podcast. But if you're going to get a breed, we would really suggest that you do go to a reputable breeder, one that breeds the cats in their own home. Don't go and buy them online. But I think better still, even if it's a breed, going to a breed rescue. But ultimately, I think we should be promoting as well our moggie cats here and saying that we should be going to rescues to get those.
Absolutely, because statistically, your average moggie lives a year longer or has a longer life expectancy than pedigree cats. Obviously, it varies from pedigree to pedigree, but some of them, like the Sphinx, their average life expectancy is only 6 years. Whereas your average moggie these days is often making 14, 15, 18, even 20. So, that's another thing to think about. But anyway, join us next time, because we will be talking about some of these extreme characteristics and really why they're not great for cat welfare.
Yeah, so until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Vet Stalking Pets with Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at info@advovet.co.uk. And please join us again for our next episode. Your pets will thank you.